In this video, I'm gonna build a corner mounted pull-up bar. Now, most pull-up bars are either ceiling mounted, come down from the ceiling, or are mounted on a flat wall, which requires a bit more engineering and support than this corner pull-up bar. It is simpler than a ceiling or wall mounted pull-up bar, as I think you'll see. It's also really solid and offers you a little bit more room in front of you away from the wall just because you're taking advantage of that corner. So as you can see in my home gym, I've got a lot of different pull-up options, which I really like. So I'm not building this because I need my first pull-up bar. I'm building this because I want a little bit more grip diversity. The pull-up bar I'm building has a big fat 1.75 inch grip. You could of course build this corner pull-up bar with the more standard 1.5 inch diameter or 1.25 inch diameter, just depending on your preference. Now as you're gonna see, I'm gonna build my pull-up bar entirely from metal, welding it up. If you wanna build a pull-up bar using wood, or a combination of wood and metal, just go to this point in the video, skip ahead to the end, and I'll show you how to make the wooden brackets to support a corner pull-up bar. You don't need to be a welder or have a welding buddy to make a corner pull-up bar, so feel free to skip ahead and check out the wooden option. Now let me just say a couple things about the placement of your corner pull-up bar before I get going with the build. Mine is going to go right over here in this corner. The main thing to keep in mind is that you need a really solid connection to your wall, and that means anchoring it on studs, or in my case I had a joist and a big pegboard to anchor it in. So for my bar, it didn't really matter where the bar went because everything on my wall is solid. You probably have a standard wall with, say, 16-inch layout of your studs. That's pretty customary. And that means that if you want to hit the first two studs 16 inches out, you'd have about a 22.5 inch bar. If you want to hit the second two studs 32 inches out, you'd have about a 45 inch bar, etc. So you want to measure your space, figure out where your studs are, and then measure your bar. If you make a pretty good sized plate for the bar, that means you could have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of where you put your holes to anchor it into the walls. Anyway, do some advanced planning. It's going to pay off. In my case, got a 55-inch long bar, so pretty good long bar, almost 5 feet. This puts me 29 inches from the corner, which is a pretty good distance. All right, so let's get started. And for me, that meant pulling out a piece of 1.5 inch pipe, which has an external diameter of 1.75 inches. That's that big fat pipe. The pipe needs to be cut off in really clean 45-degree angles on each end. And of course, you don't want to just cut the pipe off on one side and then cut it on the other. Those angles need to be perfectly aligned with one another. So I started out by drawing a midline down the center of the pipe and then using that midline as my reference point when cutting my 45-degree angles. And after cutting the pipe itself, it just needs to be prepped for welding. So I sanded it, ground off any rough edges, and then I did the same thing with my plate. This is 1/4 inch plate that I'm using, and I cut it using my angle grinder just because I wanted to get a really nice clean cut, and I find that my abrasion chop saw is just a little bit unpredictable. So with the pieces of plate cut, I should have drilled the holes in them right now. That's what you should do. Drill the holes in your plate once you cut those two pieces. Instead, I got kind of weld happy and pulled out my welder and got going on the welding. You'll see later on what I had to do to get the holes in the plate. It got a little bit funky. And with the bar all welded up, I had a good solid connection. Not the prettiest weld, but for me, not too bad. I'm still working on getting my heat exactly right and my motion dialed in, but I had some good solid welds, and that is what you need if you're making a pull-up bar, because you want that thing to be really beefy. And I have a bar in my shop hanging from the ceiling
that is the same diameter, 1 3/4. So I tried that one out and I held my bar up just to sort of see the feel, and it felt really good. It had that nice big fat grip that I'm looking for. And then over on my drill press, I had to use my head, so to speak, to drill the holes for my lag bolts. And after that, I just cleaned the bar with some acetone, painted it, and left it to dry. Now, as for mounting the bar, the only real trick is to make sure it's good and level and squared up with that corner. And I have a magnetic level that I just stuck on the bar and got it dialed in. I also marked the holes and then put a screw on one side just to be able to hang one side of the pull-up bar from that screw while I put the lag bolt in the other side. And after that, it was just a question of drilling the holes and cranking down on all 8 lag bolts. Okay, so as promised, here's how you could do it in wood, creating a corner pull-up bar without any welding. And I started by gluing up 2 sheets of plywood. So 2 3/4-inch sheets glued together make 1.5 inch thickness, which is plenty for the supports of your bar. And once you have those blocks cut out, all you need is a hole saw of the diameter of your pole. So whatever pole you're using, use a hole saw, and that is what you will use to cut your holes. You can see that I created a 45-degree jig over on my table saw and then brought it over here to the drill press. And you just want to cut your hole slowly in pieces. The hole saw is not going to go through the whole thing. So after cutting a bit, you'll take a chisel and chisel out that hole and then get back to drilling the hole. Ultimately, what you'll have in each side of the block, and I didn't actually install this in my gym, I'm kind of running out of space up there, but what you'll have is you'll have 2 blocks like this one, sand them up, get them looking real nice, and then you would mount them on your wall and then slide the pole into the holes. And again, they're 45-degree angles and it'll work just like the welded one. These arrows show you where you would then mount the blocks to the wall using similar lag bolts. And this is just a look from another angle. My hole is not perfect for my pole, so I'd probably use some 2-stage epoxy to tighten it up.
All right, thanks for checking out the project. I think these corner chin-up bars are just awesome, and I don't see why more people don't do them. It gives you really good space. It's simpler. There are fewer moving parts and angles and whatnot, and there's something about being in the corner. It just gives you a nice feeling facing the room or facing the corner. Anyway, if you build one of these guys or if you got comments, mention it down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more stuff like this. I've got a lot of different project videos on the page. And I'm also over on Instagram and Facebook and Patreon as Meta Spencer. And if you're subscribed here, you will see me in the next project video.